back to order, and we will start with agenda item 2.11. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Council. I'm Taylor Felt with the Planning and Development Services team, here to present Bylaw 2021-34 for Council's consideration of second and third reading. The public hearing for this bylaw was held on March 22nd, 2022, at which time Council's motion to move second reading of Bylaw 2021-34 was lost. In accordance with Section 9.10, motion to reconsider of Council's procedural bylaw, Council moved to reconsider the item and scheduled it be heard at a future date. When reconsidering the item, Council may consider approval of the bylaw as originally presented on March 22nd, or consider the matters discussed during the public hearing, and may move amendments to the proposed definitions, general regulations, specific use regulations, and any other aspect of the bylaw. The bylaw presented before Council today is as it was approved at first reading. We've separated the bylaw amendments into two parts based on Council's discussion at the public hearing for further consideration of amendments. Essentially, the amendments pertaining to the backyard hens and bees are in one part, and all other proposed amendments are in another. I'll bring up each part on the screen separately here, providing a brief review and leaving space for Council to discuss. And then once Council is satisfied with both parts, staff can help Council in crafting their motion. So first on the screen here, and I believe copies have also been provided. So the thicker package there are the amendments pertaining to wineries and alcohol production, parks and playgrounds, manufactured dwellings, landscaping, fencing, and screening requirements, and the rear yard setbacks for accessory buildings and structures in the lakes of Muirfield. And at the public hearing, Council did not raise any comments or concerns with these amendments, but does Council wish to make any changes or amendments to this part or these areas now?
Just reiterate which section specifically you're referencing right now.
So this would be everything except for hens and bees.
Right, okay, perfect.
Sorry about that.
No problems here.
Yeah, no problems here.
No, I have no problems.
Sounds like there's consensus. Excellent.
Okay,
Look at that. The six part's done.
fantastic.
That was just
Well.
a consensus-based discussion.
What we're all waiting for then is the amendments pertaining to backyard hens and beekeeping, which I also have separated out here on the screen. There was considerable discussion at the public hearing. Administration notes the general conversation from Council's deliberation as removing backyard hens and beehives from the bylaw altogether, or considering backyard hens and beehives as a discretionary use in the Hamlet Residential General District, with consideration of a permit for backyard hens being time limited or constrained. And does Council wish to make any changes or amendments to this section now?
So I had a thought, and I don't know if this makes it more complicated or less, but is it possible to, as part of your definition, I was thinking Part 8, specific use regulations, put a clause in that the County of Wheatland reserves the right to rescind a permit if the general requirements and/or COOP standards and requirements are not being met as per the recommendation of bylaw enforcement officer. That way, if things become out of control in terms of unsightly, or the neighbors it's a nuisance or whatever, we could take it away? Like, I don't know.
I'll let administration speak to that. I believe we have that authority. I'll let administration speak to it.
Good morning, Council. Sherry with Planning and Development. The way the bylaw currently stands, when it's no longer in compliance to their permit, we issue a warning through the development officer, working with our peace officers. Then if it continues to be in contravention, then we do a stop order, which then it can revoke the DP because it's no longer working within what was passed or approved by Municipal Planning Commission.
Okay, So it's more than just the bylaw enforcement in terms of the bylaws regarding unsightly or nuisance. This would be a stop order in terms of the actual development permit being
It's- yeah.
not running.
I think at times
accordance with the-
historically, it's in collaboration.
That's correct. It's difficult when it goes to unsightly and to show what that is, and because it becomes subjective. So what we do is work with the development permit conditions, and we would just have to be able to include conditions that we can enforce and go out and follow up with what they're doing with their property.
So really, it's what I did. It's almost like having that option.
And that does happen historically at times. It's typically dealt with at an administrative level. At times it does escalate and there are appeal processes and that type of thing which do come to council. But administration does have that authority and they do exercise that when required for development, for existing developments. And just in response with bylaw, I believe in other situations that council has been made aware of, bylaw has been included as well, just because often they are the ones who receive complaints or who are out in the community, maybe more so than our development officer. But I believe it's the development officer who has that authority to do the warning and the stop order.
Just looking at I know we talked about this last time too. So the 16 weeks and older is bizarre to me because I don't think you can actually buy animals like that. Really hard to. And I'll speak to recently, there was an odd and unusual sale where a lot of people go and buy this stuff in the spring, and it's actually was shut down because of the flu that's out there right now for avian flu. Because of migratory birds, they don't want to spread it, so they shut down the auction. So there's no way to buy those animals right now unless you buy them from, I guess, somebody that has them. How would you determine the age?
Typically, from a strictly agriculture perspective, there's two ways to get chickens. You order the chicks from the UFA or the PV Mart or wherever you normally would order chicks from, or you can buy year-old laying hens for the Hutterites, from the Hutterites. But there's a reason they're selling them, because they're wore out.
And I've seen those ones that come from large facilities, and they're not something that you want in your backyard. They're generally
Correct. Yeah, they're not.
not-
That's not
yeah.
what they're kind of set
Not
up.
a
So are you
pet.
suggesting,
they're not pets. No.
A pet at that point.
are you suggesting then, like contemplating striking that or?
Well, I'm just thinking that for discussion, because to buy chicks with kids, what's wrong with little chicks? It takes a lot of work. If you can keep a chick alive, you can keep a hen alive. The growing part of it is the hardest part of them. And that's where the kids get involved and they see it. So if you're going to allow this, why wouldn't you allow chicks? Or is there some reason behind that?
Through the chair, this was, a lot of these requirements were based on best practices and also a bit more of a conservative approach when we scanned other communities. Having this requirement in there would also remove the chance of having a rooster develop out of your hatchlings or your chicks. That was another consideration, but ultimately you can make that choice to remove it.
Still have the same opinion as before. Everything else but those two sections, it's a great piece of work. I just don't, I really don't want us to go down this road. I really fail to see how this benefits the entire county too, whereas the other ones, you can make that argument.
Any other questions or discussion? I know there was concerns raised, and I do want to acknowledge the concerns that Councillor Laursen has raised, and I recognize that those are significant concerns. I also recognize that there are folks who are going to keep backyard bees and hens regardless of whether they're in compliance with our land use bylaw or not. And I would argue that by allowing them to do it, to have backyard hens and bees and be in compliance with the land use bylaw and having that educational opportunity, I think that actually could be a beneficial thing. We're obviously seeing the avian flu issue that's happening right now. And I think that education part is a key component, particularly given that we do have commercial producers and farmers in Wheatland or adjacent municipalities that could be impacted. We did discuss potentially contemplating moving the backyard bees also into a discretionary use potentially. That's one option that we have, which would trigger the need to apply for a development permit. I also did just want to ask, I will be asking for an amendment under 7.51 to remove Eagle Lake, the restricted residential district. I have had ratepayers in Eagle Lake who would like to keep backyard hens and bees. They believe their lots are conducive to it. They do see a potential for future development, like for one person that I spoke to did acknowledge that it could evolve into like a different character of community, but at this point they didn't think this was in contravention of the current character, which is something that we did here in Speargrass and Lakes and Muirfield. And I guess what I would ask council to contemplate if we do remove it is if at some point in the future down the road, if the character of that community evolved, it's always something that council could reconsider at that time. But I would ask for it to be removed from 7.51, which would then include it in the other hamlets and permit discretionary applications for backyard hens if the bylaw were to be amended to allow so, as well as backyard bees.
But I would still want the bees to be a discretionary, bees.
So I think administration did prepare some potential wording to make bees, to remove them from permitted use and move them into a discretionary use. So I guess we would need to look under, just finding the page. Under 9.12. It would be, we could contemplate including backyard beehive under discretionary uses.
So just based on council's discussion so far, it would be removing the EE-RR Eagle Lake Residential District from 7.51, which does not permit any livestock in those communities. And we can add also under Part 9, the Eagle Lake Land Use District to reflect backyard hens as a discretionary use, similar to you see here for the HRG district.
And I think we would also just need to look at the backyard beehive definition because it references are permitted. So I think we could just amend that language to reflect the discretionary. Probably just label it potentially after the hens. I guess just remove the are permitted.
So what we'll do, Madam Reeve, just to council, if this is the consensus, what we really want to get here with respect to the amendments talked about is if it's council's decision and if it passes, we will take it and strike and do all of that wordsmithing, et cetera, fine tooth comb it to ensure that we capture everything. What we have, we do believe that we've been captured the intent based on the previous council's discussion and captured it, but we will do obviously a second and third look to ensure we have the words captured in the bylaw moving forward, if it does in fact move forward with these amendments.
So we could contemplate an amendment as outlined, like if council wants to contemplate that, or if there's a motion.
You could move second reading with an amendment too, right? Recommended amendments.
And then we haven't addressed the chicks. What is council's thoughts on the age of the hens? I see what you're saying, like it creates a challenge. It might create a market for a rural person to sub-raise chicks to 16 weeks.
Being that we have some, and we order some, and we have some that get hatched at home too. It's the biggest draw. Anybody that comes in the house, oh, can we see your chicks? Like they're in the laundry room right now because they need to stay warm. And I didn't want them there, but they're there. But everybody wants to see them. They're cute and whatever. I mean, they do die. It happens. We've already lost 7. Like they just up and die.
Yep.
There's no reason. We got turkeys too, and they do the same thing. They just flop over and they're dead. So it is the draw. It's kind of the whole. If you're doing this, if you're not allowing chicks, then to me it seems kind of. If you're doing this, you might as well allow chicks, and then they can get them from UFA or from PV Mart. They can buy the coop right there. All that stuff is there. The whole market's there for it. But
Then what do they do with the rooster?
rooster, you sell them.
If you want to pay extra, you can get them sexed.
Can, but it's not always guaranteed. But I think
But, yeah,
it's not a bunch of money to get them sexed. But you can also pay the money and have them processed. You can go to Cheddar Colony and pay $6 and they will put it in a bag for you, all nice and fresh to eat.
Councillor Aykroyd?
So, at what age does a chick become a hen? Is this like,
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Are we going to get philosophical?
yeah, well, no, I'm just wondering, you said
What comes first?
applicants shall keep a minimum of 2 and not more than 6 backyard hens that are at least 16 weeks of age. So if the definition of a backyard hen is any chicken that is 16 weeks or older, then it doesn't matter how they get them, does it? Like, I don't know like a chick is a chick, and at what point does it become a hen? Does it become a hen when it first starts to lay? So I don't know if this is,
I think they would be precluded from having chicks if they were not included in the definition of backyard hens, because we're not allowed, hamlet dwellers are not allowed livestock. So chicks would be encompassed outside of this definition. So they would be
like, okay,
illegal.
I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
If
But I believe
that's
that-
correct, administration can clarify, but that would be my understanding of our land use bylaw.
I'm just thinking that if you're going to have a backyard coop, you're going to stock your backyard coop, you're going to have to stock it with something, like,
Administration had referenced that this was trying to circumvent or prevent people from maybe having chicks and then tiring of them, and maybe like the ethical treatment of chicks that were bought when they were small, just for that, what Scott was referencing, versus like responsible keeping of hens for whether it's your own food source or that type of thing. And I believe that was recognized from best practices in other municipalities. We can contemplate something different, but that was the rationale, was just to prevent people from, getting chicks and then not following through with the responsibility of.
is that, I just don't know if it's necessary to get into this,
Yeah.
this kind of wordsmithing, and the fact that that argument can be used on any animal, cats, dogs, ferrets, whatever, are legal to be.
I support the removal of that, or at least 16 weeks or older. Like personally, I support that. But I'm just looking for, and it sounds like Deputy Reeve Clausen supports that.
And I'll kind of back this up a little more. So my son, I think he was in ECS or preschool. They actually hatched chicks in a classroom. Watched them grow up to however big they were. And I don't know what happened to them after that, but they didn't stay.
There are
past it.
programs
Yeah, there's
that
lots of, so they allow it in school. So if you're looking for the education portion of this and you want kids involved, you're going to get more involved with chicks and not hens. If you're looking for that aspect of it, that's what all I'm saying. And I don't, yeah, there's a lot of work that's involved in this. I personally probably would like to see this be discretionary as well with the chickens, just so we have some idea what's out there is coming at us.
And they were proposed as discretionary, and then that allows for that education process. And I think it would be good for that education process too to just stress the gravity of the responsibility and the work that's involved, the mitigation of disease, and the significant impact that can have on our agriculture community. We have that opportunity then to make sure that all of that is integrated into the process.
And if this should pass as amended, staff will do that. I mean, this will be an extensive education campaign, and there's a lot of other best practice from municipalities that we've looked at that do that work, so.
And it would also, so it could be the campaign, but also then integrated into the DP
For sure.
application process.
I'm fine to take out the 16 weeks or older section.
Donna, Tom?
And then the next statement is you're not allowed to keep roosters, so hopefully that's
Leave that.
when they find that there are roosters, they'll get rid of them.
And I mean, that's part of that responsibility for that process. They need to educate themselves on how to deal with animal health issues, how to deal with culling, how to deal with, but it is an extensive responsibility, and the advantage to this process is we have that opportunity to educate, which versus sort of non-compliant holding, or like non-compliant, doing this in non-compliance, you don't have that education opportunity to educate about the potential impact on egg producers and just on our agricultural sector. So, yep.
When we're talking about roosters, I know why they're there is because of the noise, but there is an ability to de-squawk a rooster. Believe it or not, there is. And they do actually will give their life to protect the hens. Like, that's why you keep them, is because they will sacrifice themselves to keep the hens alive. So they do have a purpose. But am I wrong? Like,
No, you're not
I
wrong.
think
Yeah.
likely just in terms of enforcement of this, and because it is in a hamlet, I do support the exclusion of roosters.
But if someone comes in and says, well, my rooster doesn't crow, they can do that. They can go to the vet and they could get that done. Or you think you can do it at home, but it has to be done
But
at a
he should
certain
be
age.
complaining, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
So someone could say that my rooster doesn't crow, and they can do that.
And then the other thing that we had previously discussed was just whether, so typically when a development permit comes in, this could be addressed at the development permit stage, or it could be set in advance, is we had discussed a potential term limit. There's pros and cons to that, an advantage being that it could be reviewed in the case of nuisance. However, just given our previous discussion, in the case of nuisance, the permit can also be, you could have a stop order in place, which would be stopping the development permit. Disadvantage, obviously, is there's that ongoing cost, and it needs to come back to for decision for each term. So just open that up to council direction.
My concern was always about circumventing problems down the road and having an option to stop somebody from having a permit if they weren't being responsible about it. And so, given the discussion today, I feel more confident now than I did then that we have some options for mitigating that risk. So I don't feel a need to have a 2-year term or whatever term limit at this point.
So, something to consider. What are we going to do when somebody gets backyard chickens in their yard, and then the neighbor's cat comes and kills a chicken, and then the owner of the chicken shoots the cat with an arrow? This really happened in one ham. I really think we should just take it out, because there's more harm than good that can come from this. But how do you guys think we'll handle that? Because that actually happened.
The same way we would have to handle it if it's being done in non-compliance. You enforce the land use bylaw as it is. The land use bylaw does, well, I think we actually address care and ownership of other animals as well, not in changes we're contemplating today or amendments we're contemplating today. I'd have to look to administration about the exact language around cats.
Well, that's just the one that actually
But-
happened. It could be a dog. There's a number of things it could be.
And that can happen whether backyard hens are being held in compliance or not. Ultimately, owners are responsible for pet behavior. I don't know if that's in our bylaw or provincial statute. I'm not an expert on that.
So just, Madam Reeve, to council, I would have to look specifically at that, but nonetheless, I do believe there is. But I think for a level of comfort for council, we often do broad stroke reviews of our land use bylaw on a consistent basis. So for example, if this were to move forward as amended, we would be monitoring this very closely. I mean, there's significant discussion here. We heard significant feedback from ratepayers. We did a significant engagement process. So if we hear that there are issues, we will look and involve council very closely in terms of improving them or, in fact, reviewing them and reconsidering perhaps. As directed by council, this was brought forward. And so we did, and we'd use the best practices. But I think for just a level of comfort for council, if there are significant issues, we will red flag them and address them immediately and involve council as well. So just to put that out there.
I'd like to add to that comment that it would be good to keep in mind that should this pass as amended, and then it's not working quite as well and we go to review it, those that have received a development permit would still be able to continue, and we cannot remove that development permit until it has actually lapsed, that they haven't had one in 12 months. So if they kept the development permit and came back for renewals, we would not be able to refuse the renewal. So just, it's something to keep in mind until it becomes an active DP.
I don't disagree with Councillor Larson and his concerns. I mean, I expressed them last time. But when I look at history and where we came from as human beings, we lived with agriculture. They're close to our homes, in our homes, 50, 75, 100 years ago. And there's proof now, like if you talk to some people that live in rural areas and Amish and things like that, that they're actually healthier living with these animals sometimes. So it's hard to know what the best decision is. If it hadn't been for bigger, larger municipalities asking for this and allowing it, we wouldn't be here. And it's just it's amazing how society's going, and I don't know. It's a hard one. I'm concerned about people and their health and their safety of animals. I know what it takes to raise these animals. I've seen you do learn death is a part of life, and I think people forget that, especially in urban centers. They don't have that relationship with it. When you raise animals, you will see it very quickly that when you have livestock, you have dead stock, and it happens so fast, and you got to deal with it. And is that a good lesson to learn? I think it is. So people need to know where their food comes from and what it takes to raise things so they can make informed decisions. Is that part of this? Maybe not, but it does affect my decision somewhat too. So it's difficult.
Question to administration, and then we'll go to Councillor Larson. In terms of developing the education materials, would it be possible to sort of access Alberta agriculture information? They had some on like backyard hen, or like on hen keeping and mitigating disease risk and that type of thing. And then the second part of my question was, we did have an agricultural producer who had expressed a concern. Would it be possible to also just engage with them if there are elements of education that we could integrate to do what we can to mitigate that risk to them as well?
Through the chair, absolutely. This is also what we've seen from other neighboring communities where they are partnering with local producers to build that education program, and the province also provides quite an extensive package that we can make available to interested parties.
Thank you. Councillor Larson.
And I'll just respond to Scott Singh. And you're right, that has happened years ago, but typically up until just recently, it's been by people that either grew up on a farm or had grandparents that were there, and they understood. I mean, the Campylobacter bacteria is a very serious reportable disease that you can get from chickens. I know because one of our kids got it one time. And my concern is that we're going to have a whole bunch of people with only urban upbringing that aren't going to recognize this and maybe aren't going to be able to get the training to do this properly. I'm not 100% sure it's a great idea here. I get what you're saying too, though. Like, I mean, our kids loved it when we had chicks. They also knew they didn't get to pick them up and kiss them.
No snuggling. Doesn't matter how cute they are. Okay. In terms of forward motion, perhaps we should just walk through amendments that we could potentially consider, just so that everybody is clear. So part 2, the larger package, I don't think we've had any proposed amendments to that. So then to the backyard bees and hens, you want to just walk us through?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm just catching up here.
And if you need a minute, we can, would it be easier for administration if we finalized after lunch? Does that give you some more time?
Absolutely, yeah, we could do that. We could
Then
get
you're not
everything in order.
rushing.
Yep.
And you can
Get everything in
make
order
sure you've
and walk
captured
council
everything.
through.
Okay.
For sure.
If you even want to email it at lunch, then we could review it just before we reconvene.
Looks like it's good timing for that one.
Perfect. Okay, well, perhaps we will recess for lunch. We'll reconvene at 12:45, and administration can circulate an amended copy of the bylaw with some potential amendments we could contemplate based on the discussion that we've had, and we can look at